Okay, I think we're about to get started. Can we get our slides up, please, on the screen? Great, thank you so much. And wow, what a group attending. Thanks for coming to our session. Just before we started, so my name is Ben Strick, by the way. I'm here with Suze. I just wanted to give you some context as to why we actually pitched this session and why we wanted to do it. So I've been doing a few different presentations at Perugia for the past several years, really banging on about the work of open source investigations in the community, showing cool things like satellite images, justice and accountability from the power of a laptop with an internet connection. But oftentimes those investigations aren't really possible without actually broadcasting them to an audience that might not necessarily understand big data. They might not be able to read satellite images themselves. They might not be able to understand the massive amount of videos that we've been able to analyze and the data that we've been able to analyze. So it's all about visualizing those investigations. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I've had the honor of working with many journalists on this, but one specific journalist who is an absolute rock star and will hate me for saying that is Suze, who can turn amazing data-based investigations into good visual products. So Suze, do you want to introduce yourself?
I told him not to do that. Hi, so I'm Suze. This is my first session, so I'm not a veteran like Ben. But I joined CIR about a year and a half ago as the head of the new documentary team. And before that, I worked for 12 years for the BBC. 5 of those was with a program called Africa Eye for the World Service, who do long-form investigative documentaries about Africa. And they were the first within the BBC World Service to set up a dedicated open source unit. And I was one of their leading producers at the time. So overall, I've got about 7 years of visualizing and doing storytelling for open source data and trying to get that into a longer form video product. So I'm going to hand back to Ben because he's going to start.
Great, thanks. Okay, so a little bit about who we are and the organization that we work with. So we work with the Centre for Information Resilience. That is a lot of words. I'm not going to use that again. I like to shorten things. CIR. Basically, we're a not-for-profit registered in the UK, and we focus on 3 main things. That is documenting human rights abuses around the globe, combating disinformation, and documenting online harms against minority groups. Now, these 3 things are very important for us, but we do this using open source investigations. That's not just data, that's also transparent information so that anyone else can make these findings. And we get challenged a lot on our findings. I can reassure you, we're not going up against cats and dogs, we're going up against big, vicious governments. And they often want to take down those findings. So we're able to defend those findings using publicly available information. And we do that by answering certain questions that happen around the world and come up for us. For example, when my mum asks me, hey, what's happening around the world? All she wants to know is a couple of main things. Where did it happen? When did it happen? What happened? And who is responsible? So that's what we do when we do our open source investigations. We answer those questions. And that's pretty much our methodology. This is our website, so we publish a lot of investigations around the world with teams from Sudan, from Myanmar, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and other places where we're able to document this information. To give you a little bit of an idea as to where our information comes from, well, it comes from places that everyone uses here. You might post a picture of your muesli bowl on these platforms at the same time that someone from Gaza or Ukraine might be posting a video of a strike, for example. And so we're able to get our information from those places, but it's not just about taking information from social media. We're not one of those folks that just sits on Twitter and takes content from Telegram and posts it online, calling it OSINT. We actually do clever things with this as well. So we use satellite imagery, for example. We do 3D recreations to understand where something might have come from, where it might be fired from. 3D mapping, so that's from Jay up in the back of the room with the awesome hairdo, that does these sorts of things to understand the scale of damage as to what's happened in villages in Myanmar. I'm going to go through a little bit of an agenda, and we're going to talk about what we're actually here to present to you today, and that's Suze. So Suze, do you want to go through the agenda? Thanks.
Yes, So first of all, we're going to have a tiny introduction as to why open source, of how open source investigations have changed conflict reporting. Then we're going to look at the result of that is having large data sets of videos. So how do you represent that data? How do you get that information across in a story? So that doesn't have to be video. That's the last bit that I will talk about in the end. But initially, Ben will talk you through some of the case studies of how you can represent data sets and pull out stories in interactive maps, network mapping, and online, basically like the old online reports. All of these tips and tricks and everything that we'll talk about, we've put into a document that at the end, if you stick around, it'd be embarrassing if you didn't, you can take a QR code. There will be a QR code with a link, so then you can kind of pay attention now and make sure that you have everything afterwards. Oh yeah, and it's me, the clicker is there. Right. So, first of all, if we look back at, well, let me take you back to the war, the Iraq War in 1991. That's 34 years ago. That's within my lifetime, and I think a lot of you in the room as well. If we look at how that war was covered when it started, for a brief moment.
Now let's return to Baghdad. We have 3 reporters in the Al Rashid Hotel. Come back in.
There's a bomb that has come down now. You'll probably hear the report at the refinery in just a minute. We saw the bomb come down. We saw the flash, and you just heard the explosion. And there was a big blast of bomb blast that came through this window. I've just come from checking out the other side of the hotel, and it's equally intense on the other side.
Though 45 other Western journalists were in the same hotel, CNN had the only working phone line out of Baghdad.
So this is from a very good documentary that you can find on YouTube called Reporters at War Dying to Tell a Story. And it shows you that only 34 years ago, the beginning of a war was covered mainly with one phone line out of a hotel that CNN had, which is crazy if you think about it. So then, unfortunately, in 2003, there was another war in Iraq, and it just happens to be that we found good stuff for the Iraq war. We're not picking on Iraq, but that's 22 years ago, which I think definitely most of the people in this room were alive with. It's within our lifetime. So how was that covered?
From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
It was just over 90 minutes beyond President Bush's deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq that U.S. warships and planes, there were F-117 stealth bombers involved, launched the opening salvo of Operation Iraqi Freedom. The attack came in waves, cruise missiles, followed by the F-117 stealth bombers with so-called bunker-busting bombs. Their target, a bunker believed to be sheltering what are called top leaders of the Iraqi regime. Now, this is what it looked and sounded like in Baghdad. It was this short, and this is what happened.
So you can see it's quite crazy that they had just a camera on the rooftop that was kind of recording the sound, but you don't really see much. And so that was just limited video and a fixed camera, and that's only 22 years ago. But what brings all of these together, and what is the core of journalism and conflict reporting over, I guess, in the entire history of what we've done, is that the reporter usually was your trusted source on the ground. He was the one, or he or she was the one who was there, who had the information, and who you trusted. If we think back at all the wars, unfortunately, that have started in the last few years, the bombardment of information and videos and access on the ground has been phenomenal in comparison. And sure, we still have those reporters on the ground and they are still doing very important jobs, but actually there's so much disinformation. And if we want to really tell those stories, we can't ignore all of those sources that are coming in a digital age at us. So that means that we've now got an overload of videos, an overload of things that come, and they need verification. So that leads to massive data sets and massive amount of just things that we need to look at, and creates a problem in how do you sell that, well, not sell, how do you tell that story in a meaningful way? How do you tell what's important, what's not important, and how you can bring all of this together? And so that's why we think it's important to start here as a reminder, as like, how did we get here? And now I'm going to hand back to Ben, who will tell us about the first case studies, which is not about video, but different ways of representing that data.
So one of the, ooh, that's really loud. So one of the things we really do a lot with data is that rather than using one video to tell a story, we'll use multiple videos and multiple data points to show a scale of something. Now at CIR, we are not investigative journalists. We map data to work with independent organizations, civil society, media, and humanitarian efforts. And so one of our focuses is to, for example, create maps of verified information. This is data identified through the videos and photos of those brave enough to film them, and then we identify that information, analyze it, categorize it, tag it, and map it. And this is a way that we like to visualize this content, because as you can see, when you zoom out in a much larger picture of what we're looking at here with Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, occupied Palestinian territories, we can see the scale of damage in a way that I can't really tell you in words, but I can show you through the volume of that footage that's been collected. Now I'm going to go a little bit into that map that we created using ArcGIS, which is a mapping platform. And I'm going to specifically just take you into one of those dots. And again, this is the importance that Suze and I would like to press in this entire presentation. We talk about data. We talk about nodes on a map, dots on a map, but each one of those represents a human story. This is one of those videos. It shows the aftermath of a strike on a hospital in Gaza. I think many of you are aware of what's happening in this region, but that's just not the only video. There are many videos from that day that show other angles, both within the hospital, outside of the hospital, just after the strike, 24 hours after the strike. And it's very useful for us because someone else may just scroll on their social media timeline and see disconnected videos, but for us it's important to connect this information together and then show it on a map that's variable. How do we do this? You're probably wondering, and this is what we want to get into. Well, we build databases. Now for me, I like to show maps, I like to show videos, but the important aspect and the bread and butter that we do is data sets. For us, this is a very beautiful thing. If there's any other spreadsheet wizards in here, you're probably like, oh man, that's really cool. This is actually designed by some of the folks up in the back right of the room. We've got some spreadsheet queens up there, so woohoo to you guys. But this is a spreadsheet that we do to document what happens in Gaza, Lebanon, West Bank, and Israel. And what we do is we separate this into columns for each line of visual media, photos and videos. And we have a team of about 12 to 15 that goes through every single video. Now that's not nice work, right? But someone's got to do it. And so we go through this and we identify, again, you can see up the top, full coordinates. Where, like those questions my mum asks, right? Time, when, what, description, who is impacted, who are the victims, who might be responsible. Now by doing that, we're able to then spread that into another spreadsheet, which takes that independent footage into incidents. So rather than me saying, oh yeah, we've got these independent videos, let's couple these to show one event. And that's how we end up with something like a map. And I'm going to take you into this specific section, which shows that hospital that I showed you before, where those independent line items of different videos coupled into incidents are now visualized on a map. And this is how we decided to visualize this kind of content, to make it interactive. This is actually a publicly available map. You can have a look at it on your phones. You'll also see it in the QR code at the end. It's on the CIR website as the Gaza-Israel OPT map. So sometimes we don't always have footage to use. We don't always have a video or a photo of a strike or anything. And sometimes there's also important cases such as the disinformation environment that we want to report on. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how influence online works and how we have visualized investigations before. This is specifically a case study that relates to an influence operation investigation that we did quite some time ago around interference within an Indian election in West Bengal. This is a very regional area, but a very important area for us to watch. This is the tweet of the investigation, or the start of the investigation. Now, don't forget, while I'm talking this through, I'm showing you the steps of this investigation. This was the first tweet we identified. A very interesting tweet, very innocent language, but very politically divisive language as well. But that wasn't the only one. That hashtag, Amit Shah in Bengal, was the 6th highest trending hashtag that day in India. Let's have a look at how it got there. Well, it's not the only person that was posting out that exact same text and that exact same tweet. Now, I could tell you that there are a lot of tweets that were similar like this, but for me to be able to show you is a different story. Again, visualizing open source investigations. But that's not the end. Let's follow this rabbit hole a little bit further. Well, the interesting thing about this hashtag, it was actually originating from a little WhatsApp group. This is called a coordinated campaign, where we get influencers, perhaps a lot of motivated political people, to say, hey everyone, let's tweet this out in the next hour, like this, and it shares a Google Doc. And woohoo, we have suggested tweets for this political party that everyone can go into the Google Doc and say, let's go, next hour, post these tweets. Unfortunately, this is how this stuff works in certain elections. But interestingly for this one, all of those tweets that I've showed you before, we created a network graph for, and the way that we visualize this is by identifying all of those tweets that post the exact same text, you can see in green. Of the Indian election that happened in West Bengal, or the election that happened in West Bengal, all of the content posted around those, the volume of those that posted that content from that Google Doc I just showed you are in green. Now, when you see network graphs like this, some people might think, he's just showing off because he can do network graphs and all that. But there's a reason why we show this content, right? To show you the scale and the volume of campaigns like this. Now, this is really interesting because if I take you back to that Google Doc, and this is an important part about visualizing open source investigations, is that when we identify who is responsible, we don't always want to name that person, because that could be someone that maybe is just doing their job to put food on the table for their kids. And so this individual, unfortunately, the author of that Google Doc left their details on that Google Doc. That individual worked as a team lead at social media at MyGov India, an Indian department, now Indian government department. Now, when we published this, we could have done an expose to say, this person is responsible for running the biggest influence operation in the West Bengal election. But we didn't, because we chose to block that information out. And this is how we start to think about how we visualize open source investigations. It's not always just about fun. It's not always about identifying who is responsible, but also doing it ethically as well. Great. I'm now going to move on to a last case study that we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to take you into a different area. I've gone from Gaza into India, and now I'm going to take you into Sudan. And this is a map that we have on Sudan, specifically ran by our project Sudan Witness, who we have the leader of in the back of the room there with the blonde hair. Hello, Anouk. And this is an incredible map that their team has put out. I'm showing you this, and you're probably like, wow, that's a really cool map with a lot of cool data. Actually, this is awful, because every dot that you see on that map is a village that's been burnt to the ground. Homes, communities destroyed. But visualized to show you the scale. Again, publicly available for you to view and for the world to pick through. But not only is that information available, also, each one of those dots represents videos filmed there as well. And I'm going to take you into a little case study of one of those villages that was burnt down recently in an area in the north of Darfur. And I'm going to show you where it happened, when it happened, what happened, and who might have been responsible. And specifically, I'm showing you this because, again, thinking about that visual element. So where did it happen? Well, we have video footage from this region, which the amazing Suze was able to visualize this by saying, hey, how did you guys find it? Well, we have a green line on that ridge line that matches this mountain range, and we have this village here. Not only do we have that, but we can see these buildings in the background. And then if we look at this panorama, we can see those buildings and that tree in between. And then this video on the left, if we pan around, we can see a little bit of a panorama. We orientate our map, and we can see these two buildings, this berm, and this building on the top left up here. Now, what I've just shown you, you're probably quite impressed with. If I told you that we had verified some videos of a location, you'd be like, ha, prove it. Well, we've just shown that. Again, visualizing open source investigations. So when did it happen? Well, Suze used the magic trick, and I think Jay was also involved in this, so thanks, Jay, of doing this amazing thing of just, rather than saying when it happened, actually, let's think about doing a screen record of local media reports who actually had access to the ground. Maybe we could even cross-reference that with satellite imagery or other videos that these individuals were filming when they burned down these villages. What's also interesting is that these were not the only videos filmed on that day and that point in time. Multiple villages were burned down one by one. And we're able to identify that using satellite imagery, using other things like other videos, and so on and so forth, to show the scale of just how much that's happened. In identifying what happened, again, showing a linear timeline, I can stop and say to you that multiple villages were burned down and lots of people filmed themselves doing it. But why don't I show you that proof? And so we have videos from village after village, filmed by individual from individual. And again, these guys are filming themselves doing it. They're showing themselves doing it. So we're able to walk you through that process as well. Again, who is responsible? I could say that this might be the RSF, or I could show you the visual matches and the patches. And what patterns and trends does this show? Well, if we have a think about the wider aspect of this, it's not the only time it's happening. And how do we show a systematic pattern? Well, that's a map, isn't it? That's a scale of this. And so I think that's an interesting way to look at that in terms of visualizing data and telling that story with proof. And now I'm going to pass to the magician behind a lot of this work to show you how it's done, Suze.
Hi. Thank you. So there's obviously the types of case studies that Ben has told you, but I would like you to imagine the next scene that you have made your decision and you're about to kill someone, right? I'm glad that there's nobody here who probably has been in that situation, but for the sake of the argument or the example, let's imagine that you were about to kill someone. The last thing you would imagine you'd be doing next, or that most people don't think they would be doing, is pulling out their phone and filming it, right? That doesn't seem like a very good idea for anybody, but you are wrong, because almost everybody, or well, we find a lot of evidence of people filming their murders, especially on the battlefield and in a lot of the conflict areas. And that is the backbone of a lot of the stuff that we do and a lot of the films that we make, is people filming themselves doing horrible things. And that's the kind of access that ultimately, as a journalist on the ground, which I have a huge ton of respect for, you will never have that level of evidence, because you'll very rarely be there when somebody actually shoots somebody. So the point is that we really want to make use of that type of evidence and tell these stories, because they're just giving it to us on a silver platter. So about 9 months ago, we started at CIR, we launched our YouTube channel. So we've got a few films on there, the most recent one being about the massacres in the coast in Syria, which we published on Sunday. And it's obviously not the type of content that goes far and wide on YouTube, because it's age restricted. So a very warm request for everybody here, if you're interested, to subscribe. Yeah, so all of these films were part of me and Jay, who I want to give another shout out at the back. He hates it. Anyway, so the stories that I want to, or the examples I'm going to talk to you about today are all kind of from some of these videos. So when we're talking about data sets and turning them into videos, most of the videos that we've made and that I've made at CIR, but also at the BBC, come from data sets with thousands and thousands of videos. But the same things that I'm going to talk about apply if you've got a smaller example, if you've got only 100 videos or a few hundred videos. It still becomes very difficult to know the wood for the trees. Where do you start? Often it's the same thing over and over and over again happening, and the whole point of what you're trying to do is to show that there's a pattern or that there's something happening on repeat. So often when you ask how do you tell that story, you will get some generic examples of saying like find the most visual case study, which is 100% true. But what is the most visual case study? When you've seen it 10 times over, how do you know which one is the best one? And especially if you're working with a team of investigators who, as a whole, are all looking at the same type of material, how do you instruct people or tell them what is visual and what isn't? If you don't know, right? So then there's the alternative one that people also say is the zoom in, zoom out technique, which is what we tend to do in any case when you're doing data sets, is that you zoom in on one particular case study and that becomes representative of a wider trend that you're then trying to explain. But again, that's good advice, but how do you decide which one to zoom in on? So I've developed what I'm calling the OSINT story trigger list within CIR based on my own experiences, and it's definitely a work in progress. It's not final. I'll show you in a minute, and it will be on the Google Doc. But the idea behind the trigger list is that it's what it says on the tin, it's triggers. It is a list of things that you can use when you've gone through a data set, when you've lost a bit of track of like, what am I actually looking at? What are the things that I could pull out of this to tell a story? It's triggers. So it doesn't mean that if you find any of these triggers, that necessarily has to be your story, but it's a starting point. It's a trigger to think, is this a story? And it's also a trigger to think, do I need to do some more research about this one in particular rather than one of the other ones? And often if you find a trigger, if you find a second trigger from the list, that's a really good direction of like, okay, this might be a really good reason for me to look a bit further. So this is my little list, which will be on the Google Doc, so you don't have to worry. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I will use it to show how, well, I'll refer back to it to show how we've used it in our storytelling. So first of all, what I do want to do is have a good look at the four categories. So the first one, man bites dog. I think everybody who's gone to journalism school will have heard of that one. It's basically the standard, most obvious journalistic principle that if a dog bites a man, it's not news, but if a man bites a dog, it is news. So that's kind of the starting point of any journalist. Is it the latest, the biggest, the most important incident? That type of thing. If you go to context or editorial, this is a lot more about within this framework that I'm looking at, within the place, the geography, the type of scene that I'm looking at, what is important? Why would something be important here that might not be important somewhere else? That's kind of where we're going with that one. Visually and technically, if you find that you have, for example, 100 videos that are all kind of similar length and all quite like low resolution, shitty mobile phone footage, you can end up with one person all of a sudden had an iPhone and had a very high resolution video of the same thing or the same type of event. That should very much be a reason for you to think, right, I'll bump that up the list. That's definitely a place to start. If I wanted to visualize this, this should be something, a trigger for you to kind of keep it separate or keep it in the back of your mind. And then there's patterns in the way that we've already spoken about. Once you start to see little clusters, geography, people, the same things happening in the same place at the same time is always a very good reason to start to dig further as well. So how have we done that for some of our films? This is I'm just going to show you snippets of some of these scenes. This is a film from out of the Myanmar Witness project that we have. And basically there is, unfortunately, hundreds, or well, it's a very regular occurrence to have airstrikes in Myanmar. It's no longer news, it's the thing, it's the day-to-day. And because we wanted to do a film about these airstrikes and what does that mean in the context of this war, how do you choose which particular airstrike you're going to show? So I'm going to just play this little video. When videos show one thing, and authorities deny everything, how can we find out what really happened? Watch our investigation on YouTube. So this is obviously just a tiny trailer, but it already balances on the hook or the reason why we chose this particular incident, because most of the time when you have an airstrike, nobody bothers to say anything about it or nobody will bother to deny it. For this particular one, we had the authorities denying what had happened on camera through a video. That was the reason why we were like, okay, this is a balanced, we've got a bit of a thread here that we can use as a storytelling hook, that we've got an unusual response from the perpetrators that they denied it. And then the second part of it is that because we then had a closer look at that particular case, we found extra layers of evidence that we don't always spend the efforts looking for. In this case, it was satellite imagery of the plane taking off quite nearby from an airbase. So the next one I want to show is, first of all, a trigger warning, well, or like a graphic warning. This is from a film that we did about executions of prisoners of war in Ukraine. So I'll just play the little, the beginning, the clip of it. A note of warning. This film includes disturbing scenes of violence from the start.
Всё, запись пошла.
This unarmed man is believed to be a captured Ukrainian soldier.
Не будешь говорить последнее слово. Молитву перед смертью.
He is shot several times at close range and dies. The shooter then turns to the camera.
Это наша земля. И эти мирные жители попросили у России помощи. Вы пришли освобождать эту землю от нацизма. И так будет до самого конца. Всё.
Over the past year, we have been monitoring videos and photographs published online claiming to show executions of Ukrainian prisoners of war by Russian forces. Among these, CIR has found 22 incidents to be highly credible. As you can see, the 22 that we chose came from a much larger data set again. And as we were going through that data set, you have to answer that same question. Where do we start? What do we want to focus on? And the reason that we started with the video that you saw is because it's highly emotional. A lot of the other ones were filmed from a distance and you didn't have that kind of connection with the victim. But then also, and I think that was the key element of this one, is the fact that they turned around and had a little monologue. So the perpetrators admitted guilt. They had a conversation with the audience. And that is what really triggered like that story out of this entire data set. And it's about looking for those bits and pieces when you've kind of lost the wood for the trees. Can you go through this list and see like, oh, okay, actually I did have somebody saying something, maybe that one is worth translating, because obviously none of us, well, not all of us will be speaking all the languages of the investigations that we're looking at. So it's also directing your resources at the things that potentially could deliver you a stronger story. And then there's obviously for this one as well, the high importance of what is actually happening, the crime, which is obvious. This one is more of a technical example. It is a film about glide bombs, and we wanted to illustrate how glide bombs, or the use of glide bombs, was increasing in the war in Ukraine. Again, we had hundreds and hundreds of videos that we could have used to start this film, but we chose this one for a particular reason. This woman is about to escape an airstrike, filmed on CCTV. This attack happened in Kharkiv, Ukraine, on the 22nd of June 2024. What's remarkable is that the moment of impact was caught on 5 different cameras. 2 on CCTV, the dash camera of a moving car, a police-worn body camera, and the dash camera of another car waiting in traffic. Lined up like this, we can count down to the moment of the attack. So for this one, as you can see, what was, to me, the trigger is the fact that we had multiple angles on the same event. And I think that's the same as what Ben spoke about earlier for Gaza. When you can recreate a scene, when you can kind of show it from different angles, it just allows you to bring the audience closer to the thing that you're talking about. And if you then think about the 5 videos that we used, it just piques an interest. The fact that just you happen to be able to look at it in that way, it's nothing more, nothing less. And I'm not saying that these triggers are necessarily always 100% the thing you need to focus on, but it's just to help you focus your mind. And then out of those 5, why did we start with the woman? Because it's a very relatable scene. It will, if you find something where a normal person is going about their normal day, but then they end up in abnormal circumstances, it will pull at the audience. It will make them almost like imagine that they're in the scene, how could this have happened to them, right? You can all see ourselves walking through a street in the way that that woman did. Then there is the sort of patterns. I'm going to quickly go over that one because Ben already mentioned that one. But it also, because the ones that we've just shown were all kind of the start of a video, but you can keep using this to kind of identify what are the case studies to use throughout your video, because that's the same one with the Sudan one, where just because we found so many videos of the same kind of unit doing all of these fires, that's a reason to include that particular time, that particular event, or that particular story. This is the last one that I want to talk about. This never made it into a video, but it's just another example of how it has already been used within our investigative team. Again, in Myanmar, there are, unfortunately, this type of footage comes out all the time, which is footage of a, sorry, I gotta go back. Right, play. I'll just hit it here. So footage of, initially you just find these types of videos of a fire in a village. And then technically, the next video is we found some actually technically very impressive footage, drone footage that local media had done. So that's already a reason to kind of focus your attention. Then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but later on, we found similar high quality footage that was also shot from a drone from the aftermath. So instantly you have a really interesting visual. In this video, we can see somebody driving through a particular street, and I want you to look closely at those two little, the church in the background with the two roofs or whatever it was. And that is kind of key because we already found a before and an after, we then went, and because of the trigger list, we went and looked for, can we find a before, sorry. And this person had, before any of the war broke out, had done like a travel vlog and driven through this entire village in this way. And there we can see the same church. And all of a sudden you can recreate a very strong visual story with footage that you've just found online of before, after, and during. And the only reason we found this bit is because of the trigger list. We were like, it focused the attention to like, what can you do? What can you look at next? How can you find a way into this story? And I just want to remind ourselves of like the whole reason why we try to visualize these stories is because we want to get attention for everything that's happening in these conflict zones, and that's what I'm going to hand over back to Ben.
So I think that's a great point. We are almost about to finish on. So this is, again, everything that we've spoken about is about visualizing data, right? And stories behind data. So a lot of what I do is maps, and it seems quite clinical and cold because we're forensically picking through things, and I'm talking about numbers and aspects like that. I wanted to take you through a project that we started quite some time ago now, unfortunately, which is to map Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine since February 2022. Well, actually, we started this map in December 2021 as Russian forces built up along the border. And the reason why we chose to do this map. So these dots, again, I'm going to go into some of the stories behind them. But the reason why we chose to do the chronological slider is to show how the full-scale invasion has changed, but also to remind you that we can zoom into each one of these for that transparency and that visual option to allow individuals to go into this kind of content. This is a story in its own, and a story where you are the viewer and you're able to choose what you want to view, in that sense of identifying those nodes, clicking on those dots, and being able to use that. And this is a publicly available map, yet again, I know, public. But this is a freely available map called Eyes on Russia. And I actually wanted to finish up with a story about one of those dots, which is the story of Sasha. And this is an individual who, this video I'm going to show you, it's quite triggering, but you wouldn't know it unless you had the context behind it. And again, it's a video. We could have geolocated it and chronolocated it, and many of our analysts skipped over it, but it's an important story to remind everyone. So Sasha, unfortunately, lost his life defending his country. He died in, I believe it was Mariupol, but correct me if I'm wrong, by someone. And this video was specifically identified on his iCloud and was stored on there. And it's a really important way to be able to think about the human nature and the stories that are connected beyond that. Now, we were investigating Mariupol at the time. We were looking up these keywords, and we found this video. And this is such a crucial video because it gives you the story of those people involved behind this. This is a video of him filming the last time he saw his parents as he hopped on that bus. This is exactly why we do this work, why we are so motivated to dig into every little bit of data. It's because of all of that effort that we can hopefully give some level of accountability to people like Sasha. Thank you so much. I'm Ben Strick, and this was Suze, and we really appreciated your time. So the QR code is available there. It's got Suze's awesome storytelling template, the OSINT trigger